I took part in my first ever 40k teams event, the UKTC Winter ITT. Somehow, I managed to convince 4 other people to let me join their team to give me a chance at seeing what this extremely popular 5v5 format is all about. You, there at home, might be asking, what is a teams event? And that's a very good question. What does it do? And how does it... Before we get to that, we need to talk about another team-based 40k experience, and that's Space Marine 2, thanks to today's sponsor, Focus Entertainment. Yes, I am serious. The Tech Marine class has been added to Space Marine 2, and you can play them right now by clicking the links below. Yes, right now. Go. Right now. You don't need to see the rest of this video. Go play Space Marine 2 as the new Tech Marine class. Are you playing Space Marine 2 yet? Well, why not? Are you stupid? Finally, there's a Tech Marine cooler than the one that Steve made for the Screaming Raven, so I can stop living in the shadow of this most cursed of miniatures. Take that, Steve, you shit. This Tech Marine is a crowd control specialist, perfectly suited to protect your allies against both hordes, big bad criminals, and rowdy nightclub patrons alike. Using the new weapon, the Omniscient Axe, the Tech Marine wades into combat with mighty AoE melee attacks to pressure your enemies and allow your allies to safely deal immense amounts of damage. The only way they could be any safer is if they utilize the power of magnets. This update also comes with new PvE missions for operations and stratagem modes, and Space Marine 2 is now part of the Xbox Game Pass by the Omniscience Axe water savings. So if you want to experience what it's like being a Tech Marine in the 41st millennium without actually having to endure the torturous hellscape of the 41st millennium, then go right now and click the links below to get involved in Space Marine 2's latest update. And thank you again to Focus Entertainment for sponsoring. So, 40k team tournaments. How does they do the thing that they do? Well, a team event pits a group of 5 players against another group of 5 players, with each member of the team playing a standard 1v1 game of 40k against an opponent on the other team. This is different to something like a doubles tournament, where you play one game but 2v2, where each player controls half an army each, essentially. You're still playing 1v1 here, but there's 5 1v1 games. I mean, could you imagine trying to play a game of 5v5 on one table? Each player would have like 400 points. That'd be interesting, I suppose. Each team is only allowed to have one army from each faction, including any supplements. So if someone is playing Dark Angels, for example, that's the only Space Marine representation you're allowed on the team. That ruling also justifies why I don't include the supplements from my Best Worst series. They count as Space Marines. No, they are not equivalent to the Chaos God aligned Space Marine armies. Please stop yelling at me in the comments. You're wrong. Winner of the match is the team with the most cumulative points across the 5 games. The games are scored slightly differently for teams events and use the WTC scoring system, which we'll get to in a moment. In order to play these 5 games, you need to determine who plays who, and that's where the draft comes in. This phase is where some of the unique, interesting strategy of the team's format occurs, as you can try and get the best matchups for your team and avoid giving anyone a horrendous matchup that will result in a heavy defeat. The draft works like this. Both teams choose one of their armies to be the defender for their team. Both of these choices are revealed at the same time. Next, each team chooses 2 of their armies to be attackers and are put forward as options to the opposing defender. These 2 choices are also revealed at the same time. Each team decides which of the 2 attackers presented that they want to match into their defender, giving the other option back to the opposing team for later in the draft. At this point, you have your first 2 matchups decided. You then roll off to determine who gets to pick the first terrain layout for their game. There are 3 normal layouts, 1 heavy layout, and 1 light layout. Normal terrain is the standard UKTC layout you get in singles events. The light layout removes the fucking squares and opens up some of the sight lines, and the heavy layout is basically the normal layout, but the terrain in the middle toes onto the center objective. This means you can hide in this big ruin in the center and still be in range of the center objective marker. The winner of the roll-off chooses which layout they want, and then the other team chooses for their side. This whole process is repeated again, with the loser of the initial roll-off determining the layout for the first of the 2 new pairings. And then the final matchup is just whatever is left over. The final piece of this team building puzzle is the scoring. You score the game as normal, but the final score is not determined by the raw score, but instead as a differential score. If the score is a difference of 0 to 5 points, the game is a 10-10 draw. If the score is a difference of 6 to 10 points, then it's a score of 11-9. If the difference of 11 to 15, it's 12-8, so on and so forth for each 5 points. This goes up to a maximum of a 51-point difference, which would be a 20-0 score. These WTC scores from all 5 games are then added together for a final overall score, and that determines the winner of the match. This style of scoring and draft system allows for some really interesting differences compared to regular singles games. Getting a close loss in singles is still a loss, but in teams, that reduction in deficit could have meant the difference between a win and a loss across the entire team's record. So it's still worth playing through the whole game as best you can. The drafting system means that the way you play can be very different. A bad matchup might make you play completely different to try and mitigate a loss, or a good matchup might allow you to just full send completely to crush your opponent earlier than normal. You aren't looking to get 100 like in singles for potential tiebreakers, you're looking to get a difference of 51 plus. You can't score if you have no models. A score of, say, 71 to 20 is identical to a score of 100 to 49. I think, unless tiebreakers take the raw score into account, but I don't know. Maybe I should have looked that up before writing this line. I don't think so, though, but someone in the comments could correct me, I'm sure. This also means that weird skew lists are more viable at these events, as you can draft around trying to get them into better matchups or terrain layouts. Unlike a singles event, where it's basically luck of the draw, teams events allow you to make those skew lists and try and draft around it to maximize potential. Not my list, though. My list is still terrible, even in teams, and I have basically no good matchups and many terrible ones. I also didn't want my team to draft me something theoretically good just so I can inevitably screw it up. And as much as I like the team event and as much as I praise the format, there is one thing that I still don't quite fully understand. The draft system is great, but I feel like it only makes a difference in the case where players are skilled relatively equally. A great player is going to beat me even in a bad matchup, so I did feel like sometimes we overthought the draft when it ended up coming down to just skill. But just like with singles events, as the rounds go on, you're more likely to go into teams of equal skill level, so it all comes down to the wash, I suppose. The other part of this is the higher skilled team with a better read on the meta might do a lot better even if there is a slight skill discrepancy. For example, in a singles event, you might see a lot of Catan spam, but if you tech into countering it, you're basically banking on that you match up to Catan all 5 games. And if you don't, then you've written your list for nothing. In teams, if you have 1 or 2 of your team members teching to counter a meta powerhouse, you are much more likely to have a chance at getting that matchup in your favor, if you can draft well. So that does have some really interesting tactics to play with, if you wanted to. Otherwise, you can just rock up and yeet yourself into the fray, but with 4 buddies right there beside you instead of alone. My goal for this weekend was simple. I don't want to be the reason we lose a round. So what I told the team was that the Screaming Ravens were here to try and take the worst possible matchups away from the rest of the team so they could thrive, and honestly, just carry me because they're way better players. But who are these people who would be so stupid as to let me join their team and weigh them down like a physical manifestation of all their life's fears, doubts, and anxieties? If you've been watching my previous tournament reports, which you should because my livelihood depends on it, and they take a long time, and I do appreciate it, you may recognize some of these guys. First, our fearless team captain, Brett, who is captain by virtue of being the person who organized it and submitted our team into BCP. Well volunteered, I suppose. Brett is bringing along his Adeptus Mechanicus, which he has used to absolutely trounce me on multiple occasions, including in this video. Next, we have Reese, who's bringing his mighty Catanless Necrons that went 4-1 at the LGT recently. He'd have bought his 5-0 GT winning Rage Custodes list, but I took the Space Marine slot for our team, so he wasn't allowed. Reese has completely destroyed me with his Blood Angels in this video, and he's also destroyed me with his Necrons, but that was a list with a Monolith and a Tesseract Bolt, but he still didn't thrash me. Quick tangent here, in my last event where I went 0-5 because I'm bad, Brett finished that event in 3rd place, and Reese won the entire thing. And they were also handing out the best in-faction trophies from the previous year, so I had to stand between 2 people, my teammates for this week, who were both holding 2 trophies each. I am definitely out of place in this team. Next, we have Daniel with his legions of shirtless angry men with big weapons. A really interesting Delve Assault Shift list in the Leagues of Votam. An army he's used to entirely obliterate me at a previous Winchester event in this video. And finally, Sir Lord Lady Father Pre-Doctor World Record Holder Seth Bryan, the first of Haugen Manor. Look, that's what he wanted to be submitted to into a BCP, and we weren't going to say no. Thank you for making this video way harder to make. You prick. Sir Lord Lady Father Pre-Doctor World Record Holder Seth Bryan of the First Haugen Manor is bringing many big birds and Be'lakor in the Scintillating Legion. He has actually yet to utterly defeat me, as we've only played each other once in a practice game, which ended up as a draw. I think it's because he was still figuring out how to play his list, and if we played again, he'd probably annihilate me. We've never actually played against each other at any event, even if we've been to a lot of the same Winchester GTs together, mostly because he's a very good player who's usually near the top of the rankings, so pairing it to him will only really happen like round 1 or 2. So fortunately, I've not had to face the wrath of his orcs. Quick story again, I technically did get a trophy from last week's event. I picked up Seth's best in faction trophy, as he wasn't there to get it, so I could give it to him at this event. Hey, at least Dan's in the same boat as me with not having had a GT win yet. As long as he doesn't decide to absurdly lock in and pop off at this event, I'll at least feel like I'm not such a complete and utter burden within the team. These images I'm using are physical cards, by the way. Teams use tokens or cards or scrap pieces of paper for the drafting phase, and I wanted to contribute something. Most of the time, people even worked out what they represented. Let's get into each match and talk through any interesting drafting decisions, how my individual games played out. I talked through all the other games, but A, I didn't play them, B, I don't really understand their lists, and C, this video would end up being 5 times as long if I did. But I'm sure if you ask very nicely in the comments, they might turn up and answer some of your questions. Or they might not, because they hate me now. Round 1 was against Cawston Gaming A, who were all super nice guys. Their team consists of Grey Knights, Librarius, Conclave Space Marines, Imperial Knights, Emperor's Children, and Custodes. As you can see from this incredibly detailed graphic, our most feared matchup was the Custodes. Most people didn't particularly care for playing into the Golden Chunkers, and there are a lot of happy faces at other matchups, so the plan is to try to get me against the Custodes. This is where the drafting part becomes really interesting. Who do you put as first defender? The first defender generally needs to be an army that doesn't have 2 bad matchups, so we have a couple of choices here. As this pairing was revealed the day before the event, we had a lot of time in the nearby McDonald's to discuss our strategy. We know that we want me against Custodes, so putting me down as first defender is a bad idea, as they could put Custodes as their first defender and put 2 bad matchups into me. Necrons could go first, as they only have 1 bad matchup in Knights, so any other attacker will be fine. However, this means that they could avoid using the Custodes as a defender and force that into Tzeentch Demons. So the best defender here is the Tzeentch Demons themselves. Worst case scenario, they attack with Custodes and something else. We just take the non-Custodes option, and it also means that they haven't defended first with Custodes. And in any other scenario, we have 2 good attacking threats. Cawston's first defender is Space Marines, which decide to take on the Necrons. Cawston wins the roll-off of the terrain choice and picks standard terrain, and we do the same. Next round, I go in as the second defender. We have the terrain choice, and my army is actually really good on light terrain. They choose to attack with Custodes and Emperor's Children, meaning I can take away the scary matchup and avoid playing against that very fast, very excessive, audacious Chaos Marines. Cawston defends with Knights and decide to take on the berserking hordes of the Votann. I mean, they're big, scary, stomping robots. How bad could a bunch of short, angry, shirtless dwarves really be? This leaves Emperor's Children to go up against Admech, so overall a decent spread. We managed to get 3 good matchups, 1 middling matchup, and me taking the 4. Speaking with my opponent Mike, who was a super nice guy, by the way, I mentioned that his list was the one that my team wanted to avoid, and he mentioned that there was one list that all of his teammates wanted to avoid as well. Mine. Apparently, the 18 Centurions really struck fear into the hearts of his team, which is understandable. They're extremely intimidating. But this goes back to what I mentioned earlier about skill being the deciding factor. I am by far the worst player on the team. Cawston Gaming A had just tried to draft around me, and by doing so, they've put themselves up against GT winning players. But hey, that's the luck of the round 1 draw, I suppose. My game against Mike was an interesting one. There were a lot of Custodes running a lot of Land Raiders, but this was a unique and fun list with lots of jet bikes. That kind of speed is scary, so I need to neutralize that as soon as possible. However, as a positive, only 1 set of the bikes had the Centurion threatening weaponry, so it wasn't too scary in shooting. The mission is Terraform on the sweeping engagement deployment on the light terrain layout. Light terrain layout features no fucking squares, and these 2 side rooms are rotated to leave extra space for cross-map firing lines. This is a great setup for me to teleport around Centurions. Both of us deployed relatively safely, with my 1 cheeky move being to block off the scouting Sisters of Silence on this left flank with an infiltrating character who could flee if needed. At the very least, it slows down potential Terraform early. Mike sent in some bikes very quickly to try and take the center, which were countered by mass Centurions causing problems. Mike pushed up the left side to take a good hold of that objective with a big Sisters block and a Blade Champion-led Warden block, but not before I had a chance to get some Terraform going. I took the right side with my fight's first Blade Guard. I used JPIs with their Shrike-buffed OC to block Terraform for a little while on the left before they got destroyed in melee, which helped in slowing down the primary. Once those battle lines were drawn, we basically then stared at each other for the rest of the game. The furthest any of my models got beyond the halfway point of the battlefield was here, when I teleported Centurions down to deal with a big block of Wardens that Mike got as far as he could, which was about here. Both of us basically realized that making the first move would be a problem. If Mike pops out, I teleport Centurions and delete whatever he exposes. If I overextend, Mike then charges and destroys me. It was essentially a stalemate. The only reason this ended up being a very slight loss, 81 to 89 in the end, is that I couldn't get through enough 4-up invuln saves against his Blade Champion and couldn't guarantee scoring that assassination turn 5 if he moved. Mike, on the other hand, got some really decent final round cards. To make this a draw, I needed 3 points, which assassination would have been, or if Mike had drawn less desirable cards in his final turn. Fortunately, by the end of battle round 4, I knew I was on track for a minor defeat or a draw, but the rest of my team had already done the damage. I kept looking to my right at Dan's game, and every time I looked over there seemed to be fewer knights than there were before. And looking down the row at the other tables, those had all already finished as well. That's the interesting thing about teams events. You can play around the results of the other games. Had the other games not gone as well and I needed to get a win, I could have played more aggressively, but knowing that I just needed to hold a relatively close game, I could coast over the line and save my brainpower for later, and also protect my ego from making any more horrendous mistakes. So for better wins, 79 to 21, a positive start to my first team's event, and so far, I've not fucked it up. Round 2 was against Warwickshire, Warhawks, Albatross, who were all super nice guys. Genestealer Cults, Blades of Ultramar, Space Marines, Eldari, World Eaters, and Death Guard. I know who I didn't want to play against, Eldari and World Eaters. They're both horrible matchups for me, but the rest I'm okay with. This match was actually on stream, which means if you want to see how the draft plays out, you can go watch it unfold on the UKTC VOD. Hey look, here's me being extremely annoyed at myself having walked around the entire goddamn hall looking for this bloody table. This was table 36, and the further this way through the room you go, the higher the table numbers. Except when you get to the 30s, then they work backwards to this one. We started here. I walked all this way, counting up the tables, only to have to come back on myself and find everyone else already preparing. The numbers don't lie! Anyway, we didn't nearly have as long to discuss the draft, nor a Macca's to discuss it in, so we slapped this chart together and tried to come up with a plan. I would go first defender. With the worst case scenario, I got Eldar and World Eaters, and I can tank the World Eaters for others. This list isn't exactly the worst for me, and a big bowl of corn berserker flakes are a tasty target for massed blast missiles. And by going first here, there's a chance that if we win the roll-off, I can take the light terrain. Instead, I get presented with Eldari and Genestealer cults. But I guess I know which one I'm going against then. Although, weirdly, again, after speaking with my opponent, my list was the one that their team feared the most. I don't get it. Am I missing something with my list? It's not good. The rest of the matchups play out like so, with World Eaters versus Necrons going onto the stream, which you can go watch on the VOD. I don't think Reese really wants me to say that, seeing as he lost, but this is what I call revenge for trapping me in my deployment zone for 5 rounds. Take that, you dumb bitch. So I'm against Genestealer Cult, piloted by Ben, who is a super nice guy. Ben is playing Outlander Claw with an extremely well-named list that has 10 battle line units and 25 units overall. Basically, this is pure Genestealer gaming. Flood the board with dudes that respawn to continue throwing wave after wave of men at them. Fortunately, we're playing Purge the Foe. And also, fortunately, I don't have a preset kill limit
and won't shut down.
You get points for holding 1 objective and more objectives than your opponents, and points for killing at least 1 unit, and then points for killing more units at the end of the battle round. Basically, I will always kill more, Ben will always hold more. And the secondaries will be easier for Ben, so I need to make sure I can at least use some of my faster units to try and stop either hold more or to stop him racking up too many secondaries. The only reason this game ended up as a 10-10 draw, technically this would have been a singles loss, but that's the joy of teams, is firstly, this was literally target practice for the Screaming Ravens. I set up 9 Centurions in this corner, and they didn't move for the entire game. They just shot. When I say kill more, boy do I mean kill more. Ben would maybe get 1 or 2 units per round. I was getting 5 or 6 in some cases. But of course, the issue is that the units I kill keep coming back and continue to be a nuisance. Secondly, in Battle Round 2, I managed to get onto enough objectives with the Centurion charge into the center to not allow Ben a hold more, meaning his primary was 6 points down at the end of the game. And then those 6 mighty Assault Centurions went down fighting basically his entire goddamn army, which meant I now had a lot of targets for shooting throughout the rest of the game. Unfortunately, I couldn't quite get Assassination as his remaining characters are all well hidden and had low knock, and Secure No Man's Land wasn't quite possible either due to there just being so goddamn many bloody cultists everywhere. I managed to chew through all of his resurgent points eventually, but god, it was a slog and a half. However, the important thing is I did my part. Across the rest team, we had 2 more 10-10 draws, 1 16-4 defeat, and 1 16-4 victory, making this a perfect 50-50 draw. To be fair, if my game had ended up as a 11-9 defeat, for example, the round would be 51.9, which is still a draw. You need a difference of 5 points in the overall score to actually win the match, but a perfect 50-50 draw is just way funnier. Round 3 was against Adeptus Incompetus, who were all super nice guys. Well, all except that infernal cuddly bastard of a mascot Barnaby who brought their team good fortune with their magical demonic powers, that wretch. At least I think its name was Barnaby. It could have been Barnabas or something around there. I don't remember. Probably should have written it down. Adeptus Incompetus has a team made up of Necrons, Eldari, Blades of Ultramar Space Marines, Monster Mash Demons, and Imperial Guard. That last army choice, I'm sure, is a result of Barnaby's infernal influence. A lot more yellow on this chart, with Necrons being the obvious choice for me to try and remove to give the others a chance. And during the draft, I did get put into Necrons. I can't remember how this draft went, to be honest. I think I went first defender. Either way, I got the matchup we wanted. Lesson for next time. Write down the draft process. I played against Tom, who was a super nice guy, with his list featuring far too many Wraiths, and honestly, I kind of made this one harder on myself because I saw a Doomsday Arc in the list and got frightened. When realistically, I have up, down it and could just avoid it and try and focus on the Wraith bricks. This game was a classic case of end of day 1 disasters for both of us. 18 Wraiths aren't just a nightmare to play against, but also a horrible experience to play as. The amount of times those spindly, clawed robotic menaces got caught on each other when trying to move them around, I thought Tom was going to lose his goddamn mind, especially as he magnetized the guns which kept falling off. I can certainly sympathize with that frustration as someone who has once tried to play 20 Hellions in 9th with those goddamn flight stands. But I also don't feel too bad because it's still 18 Wraiths and that's some sick nasty bullshit. However, I was also not immune to the brain melting effects of 3 games in a day when I teleported my 6 Devastated Centurions in front of the Doomsday Arc to get rid of it, which I just about managed to do in 1 volley. Oh, did I say 6 Devastated Centurions? Sorry, I meant 5. One of them was already dead. It didn't stop me from just autopilot rolling as if I had a full squad. If Tom had failed, like, all 6 saves, it wouldn't have mattered, but he saved 3, and 1 fewer dice in the pool could have meant only 2 las cannons getting through. So when he queried if I'd done 6 instead of 5, I had to own up to the mistake and redo the sequence, which meant this time his DDA survived and destroyed the squad in return. Stupid mistake, and not a play I really needed to make anyway, so just double stupid. Oh well, I'll take that one on the chin. Much like Tom took me getting full no prisoners against Necrons on the chin when I killed 3 characters that he'd misplayed by putting 3 solo characters in the center when realistically he did not need to. But overall this game went as you'd expect, 3 tough bricks of 24 T6 3 up 4 up 5 up wounds to play. I basically could not hold any primary, although in most cases I did enough to hamper Tom's primary with strike buffed JPIOC. The secondaries are always a bit of a pain to score when I'm left with nothing but Centurions. A 14-6 defeat, not the worst honestly. I wanted to try and keep the primary gap low to make the defeat not overwhelming overwhelming. Across the rest of the team, Brett had an unfortunate time against Aldari. Reese had got a 10-10 draw. And so Lord Lady Father, pre-Doctor World Record holder Seth Bryan on the first Hag on Mana suffered a minor 11-9 defeat. However, that was all for naught because hero of the day Dan decided that the Votann cared not for Space Marine shenanigans, getting a massive 20-0 victory, which meant that the overall result was another exact 50-50 draw. Nice work, Dan. This means at the end of day one, we are technically undefeated. We might not be getting a top ranking, but a team with me on it going undefeated across 3 matches is an incredible achievement. And I've not completely messed things up yet either. Will our fortunes continue into day 2? Will Sofa Meta be able to continue this undefeated streak at their first team outing? Will I manage to make it through the whole tournament without completely screwing over the team result? Well, tune in right now to find out on Paula's Ballot Stuff Z. No. Game 4 was against Army Reactor, who were all super nice guys and also extremely strong as a team, ending the event 10th overall. Their only loss was against Yokai, who came in 9th, whose only loss was against Sigil, who came in 2nd, whose only loss was against Vaisler, who came 1st, obviously. So this was a whole lot of player is better than draft, really. We all lost, so I don't feel too bad about the 119 defeat. And hey, at least it wasn't a full 20-0. We got some what we thought were decent matchups in the draft, but we did get somewhat unlucky. Sluffbadwursbtufom got the Orc match he wanted, as he's primarily an Orc player, but he couldn't roll a Thorpin to save his life. Unlike my opponent, Catan spam Necrons, who apart from round 1, rolled way too goddamn many. I played against Simon, who is a super nice guy, and what I'd call a fairly standard meta Necron list. Silent King and 3 scary Catan, with a whole slew of other undying Necron threats, including open the door, get on the floor, everybody walk the Necrosaur Amintar. I have the power to destroy Catans and the Silent King, but it basically comes down to 4 of invuln saves. And at the start of the game, I thought things were to go my way. I went first and poked out some Centurions, which fortunately managed to survive against Simon's first onslaught due to some poor rolling on his part and decent rolling on mine. Unfortunately, our dice rolls started to mimic our overall power curves as an army. Assuming Ravens start to drop off over the game as I lose more and more of my potential damage and scoring units, and Catans can weather enough of a storm that as they reach the end of the game, there's still scary threats hanging around that you can no longer deal with. I managed to get decent turn 2 primary and also get my Assault Centurions into the center of the board to punch the remains of the Void Dragon before they got swarmed by the Nightbringer and the Silent King. But it was on turn 3 when I fired 9 devastated Centurions at an oathed up Silent King and only managed to kill a single Menhir. Anything that wasn't saved, I ended up low rolling the damage, and of course the Menhir just got back up with the reanimation protocols. And also this stupid
fucking square
meant that I couldn't use this area for extra sightlines, relying solely on this angle here, which is actually quite easy to hide from. In fact, when I did a movement with this squad of Centurions here, I didn't even notice that there was a square there until I accidentally clipped the base of my model and it folded up. Please, TOs out there, I get it. I know that you need the expansion because you want to block off some sightlines or whatever, but just put a picket fence or something on it. You do it for this one with the rectangle, do it for the square, please. Or go the other way and just make an actual coaster. I was also an idiot and left just enough space in my deployment zone for an Ophidian squad to attempt a Hail Mary charge at Sharn, which Simon made, meaning I lost Sharn and, this being linchpin, basically my entire primary score. Without any way of killing Catans or the Silent King, I just had to try and hang on by scrounging for points where I could, which I did manage to do with Shrike for a few turns. I failed my own Hail Mary charge on his single Locust Destroy on his home objective, which would have scuppered Simon's primary for at least a round or 2. But I did manage to avoid getting Shrike and his squad killed long enough to dance around his backfield for some end game secondaries to keep the score at 119. Still, fun game, and Simon was a great opponent. Honestly, I just need to roll better on damage. It's a pure skill issue. Hopefully next time I play against Necrons, my D6 and D3 damage rolls will be a little bit kinder, so I don't have to spend so long trying to get through Menhirs for a chance at the Silent King. Foreshadowing is a literary device in which blah, 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 you get it. It'll be in the next video. Speaking of, you might remember that in my last video, I mentioned that you would find out what my worst matchup was in this video. So, here it is. Round 5 against 4 TK Gaming BFS Orange, who are all super nice guy, with one of them, Adam, recognizing me and wanting to play against the Screaming Ravens. He was playing Drukhari, which I've not played against before. It was one of the few remaining armies I still haven't played against. And as somewhat of a Drukhari player myself, I wanted to take that matchup and see what it was all about. And hey, it's game 5, final game. Let's have some fun with it. This green smiley face here for the matchup isn't because I think I could win. It's mostly because I wanted to see how the new Drukhari Codex works, and also Adam seemed like a laugh. I figured it'd be similar to Eldari or Warwickshire, something fast that could get into melee with me quickly, and those kind of armies are brutal. But like I said, this seemed like a fun game against a fun opponent, so during draft I went down as an attacker into Drukhari, and the matchup was set. Unfortunately, under that cheerful, excited facade, Adam is as brutally sadistic as any sadistically brutal Archon of Camera, and he's played me like a goddamn fiddle. I've been bamboozled, hoisted by my own petard. His Spectacular Smite list is not just a bad matchup, it is quite literally the worst possible matchup for my list. This was horrifying. There are 3 things I learned from this game. 1, never trust a Drukhari player ever again. 2, drugs are good, you should do drugs. And 3, I really really need to paint my Drukhari because holy crap does this seem like fun. I have 20 Hellions and 9 Reavers and like 20 Witches. This is the kind of list I'd wanted to run anyway, albeit maybe less Witch Cult stuff and some extra Scourges or Incubi in there. If I get the painting done, I can actually make a list pretty close to this one. Would I do well with it? Probably not, but damn, it does look like fun. I tried to deploy basically as far away as possible, worried about they turn 1 charge, but even that wasn't going to save me due to the terrifying lightning speed of the Drukhari. Witch Cult could just run at me at Mach too much, and then if I move for 2 command points, they can get into melee with me, so I can't even shoot them. And when they do inevitably get into combat with me, they just absolutely delete any of my units, even the Centurions. And then if I want to fall back from combat, I have to do Desperate Escape, which I tried once and lost 2 Centurions for it. And even if I do manage to destroy them while they're in melee with me, they could just fight on death. Lilith I knew would be a problem, but even trying to put Shrike and his lads as far away as possible didn't stop her and an entire entourage getting out of a raider behind this wall and sprinting halfway across the goddamn map directly into them. Lilith then, alone, deleted the entire squad of Vanguard veterans, leaving Shrike to have to defend against 60 witch attacks. I wasn't going to make Adam roll that. Shrike is dead. Lilith's squad died pretty quick to Centurions after that, but Lilith herself refused to die because of that goddamn 4-up invent save. Let's Go Smite's attachment rule is the combat drugs. You can either pick one or get wild with it and roll to try and get 2, but you might not get good ones or you could get duplicates. The extra ballistic skill 1 isn't that great, and the +1 toughness against my army specifically isn't ideal either. Adam and I made a joke about how drugs are bad and you shouldn't do drugs, and you shouldn't. Don't do drugs, it's bad for you. But he certainly made it look appealing when he rolled perfect drugs every single round. Adrenalite plus Grave Lotus, Adrenalite plus Serpentine, Hypex plus Grave Lotus, just constantly getting high as a kite with the best quality daggers.
Stop it. Get some help.
No, you stop it, Michael. We're not going to listen to you anymore. And then to put the cherry on top of this absolute dumpster fire of a game, I charged Shan into Malice to try and get rid of that goddamn Vectora. With both the moment, he only managed to get 10 damage through because I rolled 0 6s for sustained hits too, of which 7 were blocked with a 5-up Feel No Pain. I wish I felt no pain, but every time I fail to kill a vital character due to too many dice rolling 5-ups, I can feel part of my being wither away, leaving me with nothing but eternal agony in its wake. Not content with last week's Lucius being a bastard, just today I had to go up against 3 Catans and Malice, none of which who refused to die. And that was on top of yesterday's 18 Wraiths who all had the 4-up inv and 5-up Feel No Pain combo. I hate that bloody thing. Choose one or the other. Don't be so goddamn greedy. If my Centurions don't even get an invuln, why do you get to live? Whilst I did manage to nab a cheeky established locus at the end to keep me from getting 20-0'd, which is at least something nice to take away from this weekend, my huge defeat did mean that the overall team lost 43-57. If I'd gotten 2 more points, it would have been a draw, but unfortunately that means that this defeat was my fault. Especially as I was hyped to try out a game against Drukhari when I could have just played into a better matchup. I mean, Reese also didn't do well, but he was playing into Ragecast Onslaught and that attachment is a broken nightmare, so I'm not surprised. So that was my first team's event. Game-wise, I think I did okay. I didn't make any major screw-ups compared to last week's disaster class event, outside of being a bit too curious for my own good. And I did my job in a couple of games by tanking some of the unappealing lists for my team. I do still feel a little bit bad about forcing my daft list onto others though, so if I do another team's event, I'll probably try taking a proper list that has a bit more usability. And also, I should just be a better player, honestly. Apart from that last game, though, I don't think I dragged us down, and by that point, we were already 1 win, 2 draws, 1 loss. But these guys are very good, and with a 5th highly skilled player, I think they could have done really well. But that's probably just my anxiety talking to me, telling me that I'm a bad person. That's just normal in a monologue we all deal with. Right. Next time, we'll be looking at my last event in this trio of tournaments with the 2026 Beachhead Brawl, which will be my final 10th edition event running 18 Centurions. So if you want to see how that went down, and if I can finally break my now 14 game streak without a win, then make sure to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel further, you can become a member or patron like all of these lovely people, or buy my merch like these objective markers that seem to be really popular for some reason. Your support helps keep this channel going, because why would I put myself through this goddamn torture if there wasn't content in the end of it?